whole school of thought. As we drove from Freeport, at Bainport, as they call it, we drove through Janesville, and it was very interesting just to think about Paul Ryan and to think about what it is that he is pushing forward in legislation. Because Mitt Romney, it's tough to pin him down on anything because he's changing. His positions have changed so often. Not, I mean, as a child, you believe one thing and then you evolve as an adult. But, I mean, just listen to Rocky Anderson, who's the former mayor of Salt Lake City, also running for president. But he was close friends with the Romneys. You know, like they had dinner together, they worked together on the Olympics. And he knew them well, and he said, I mean, choice. He's completely, and his wife is completely pro-choice, he said. And now has completely changed. His mother, total advocate, Mitt Romney's mother, you know, who ran for Senate, total advocate of Planned Parenthood. And you know, Romney Care in that in itself, that Obamacare is sort of based on Romney Care in Massachusetts, and you hardly realize he was governor. It's all about Maine. It's all about being this businessman. But then if you do that, it's all about outsourcing jobs to China, or some about that. So here we have George Engelbach who's saying that Aiken misspoke, and yet Aiken and Paul Ryan, and this is why the Republican Party has so pushed Aiken, tried to push him out of the senatorial race in Missouri as he tries to take on Claire McCaskill, and was ahead until this interview came out where he talked about legitimate rape. They're concerned that it will expose Paul Ryan. That's the big issue. Right. Paul Ryan, he not only have the same views, but they have co-sponsored legislation together. For example, the Sanctity of Life Amendment that says a fertilized egg is equal to a human being, a person. The critics call it the personhood bill. A fertilized egg is a person. And Mitt Romney says a corporation is a person, my friend. And you think, okay, so fertilized eggs are people, corporations are people, but I think we have to focus on the already born flesh and blood people of this country and what is going to happen. And he has co-sponsored legislation, Congressman Aiken, Vice Presidential candidate Paul Ryan, that talks about forcible rape. And this is in repeated bills that he has co-sponsored, forcible rape. Now when people say to him, what do you mean by forcible rape, as if there's another kind? And he says, rape is rape. And that just shows when the microphone, when the spotlight is in the right direction, you can't stand up. And he knows that. And so now he says rape is rape, which is a good thing to say. But as I was talking to George Abe Lincoln Engelbach, I was asking him about these views, you know, about, for example, forcible rape. And he said, well, you know, you have to be concerned about brutal rapes. And I said, well, is there another kind of rape? And he said, well, certainly, like when, you know, a girl or a lady is inebriated and you know, and, or, you know, high on drugs, or you slip her a Mickey. I mean, this isn't, I mean, it's not just that he is impersonating Abe Lincoln, but he is a representative of his state, representing many people. He's a delegate at the Republican convention, and these are the kind of conversations we had. So anyway, the last night of the convention, following up on Abe, we look up because who's going to be the mystery guest? Everyone was sort of buzzing about it all day, and it was Clint Eastwood. I mean, these conventions are very strange. And all of a sudden, he's there with this huge shadow of Dirty Harry, you know, a man with a, you know, with a rifle. And he has this chair with the invisible President Obama. And, you know, this goes to an underlying racism, the whole idea of the invisible man, written by Ralph Ellison. And then he's going on to talk about Obama. President Obama promised to close Guantanamo, and yet, you know, it's been all these years and he hasn't closed it. And now, I think that's a very legitimate criticism. I just didn't expect to hear it from the stage of the Republican convention. And then he goes on to talk about, you know, he's presiding over the longest war in U.S. history in Afghanistan, and he had something about Mitt Romney would pull the soldiers out the next morning, and there was no one, I'm sure, who was more surprised than Mitt Romney listening to this. And then Mitt Romney makes his entrance, and he decided to come from the back, and we were over in New Hampshire interviewing people, and you only see it on the big Globotron, on the, what do you call it, the Jumbotron, that big video display, and I see he's coming down the aisle. You can't see, there are thousands of people, but on the Jumbotron you can see, and I am so familiar with this aisle. You know, I know Orrin Hatch's sneakers. I know, you know, what Peter King, the Republican Congress member from New York, not only says, you know, that doctors should be put in prison if they perform abortion. I just had a conversation with him about this. I knew everyone on that aisle, Abe Lincoln's top hat, everything. So, oh my God, he's walking down that aisle. So I say to John, start filming the Jumbotron. He said, well, why would I film it? We get, you know, as journalists, we get the Reuters feed that night that goes out to everyone, that the whole world sees. And they send it in New York. They'll pull it down at the Democracy Now! Team in the newsroom. And so he said, you know, let's just keep interviewing delegates. We don't need to film that, and it'll be a lower quality. I said, no, this is what's happening. You never know what people are going to see, because he's going to hit the New York delegation. That's that aisle. That means he's probably going to, you know, shake hands with David Koch. And we should have that. It's extremely important. Just that, I mean, it's not surprising, but it's just an image to have. And so he's filming the Jumbotron, and we're watching on the Jumbotron as he makes his way down. You see the pole that says New York, and David Koch is standing next to Ed Cox and others, and when Romney gets to him, gives him a little special bit of attention. He not only shakes his hand, he puts his arm on him, he points at him, and he moves on. I said, okay, we'll get that later, and we'll show it on the show tomorrow, the Koch-Romney handshake. So, we call up Robbie Karen, our video producer in New York. We said, grab that for the show tomorrow, because we're going to talk about that relationship. And he said, well, no, he didn't shake his, I don't see him shaking his hand. I said, what are you talking about? We saw it on, it's not just that I saw it with my own eyes, I saw it on the Jumbotron, so it was filmed. I said, yeah, look carefully, but he's not a familiar face. He's a sort of, he doesn't really take that public role usually, so you probably don't know who he is. He's a very tall guy, and I'm describing him, and Robbie's saying, no, I don't. I said, you see the New York pole? He said, yes, that I see. I see Romney coming down. I said, okay, so he's the next person. He shakes his hand. He says, no. He said, at that moment, it cuts away, and there's two young blonde-haired women, very enthusiastic. They're wrapped with red and white and blue boa feather scarves, and then it goes to a big shot of the convention overall, and then it goes back to him shaking hands with the rest of the New York delegation. I said, what are you talking about? So he sent it to us, and sure enough, for the moment he shook hands with Mitt Romney, it cuts away. But we have it, because we filmed the